We'll just give it a moment or two for people to log in, and then we'll be delighted to start our TCI Networks Global Webinar. So please feel free, if you're joining us, to pop a message in the chat, just telling us who you are and where you are joining us from today. It'd be great to hear. We have lots of people registered from all over the world. It'd be super to understand where you're listening from today and where you're participating. And we'll just give it one more minute and then we'll get started. Oh, I see Emma from ACCIÓ was first up in our chat. Great to have you here, Emma. And Roman from Ukraine. So we have lots of people coming on board to participate today, and we're delighted to have you all here with us. And Sama from Egypt. Excellent. Super. So look, maybe we will get started. So today I'm delighted to welcome you all to our TCI Networks Global Webinar, which is going to showcase a piece of work that the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance has developed on a collaborative piece around their cluster ecosystem to really explain, I suppose, how clusters have developed and what policies look like in Ukraine, and really understand, I suppose, the basis for that. So I'm just going to showcase the agenda that we have today. So here we go. So we're going to, in a few moments, have a short welcome from the new president of the TCI network, Mariana Prica. And after that, then we will give a very, very short introduction to the Accelerate GDT project. We're collaborating with TCI today to showcase some of their learnings at this webinar. And the basis of the webinar then, I guess, will be about the Ukrainian Cluster Ecosystem analysis. And we have Alexander here from the Ukrainian Cluster Alliance, who's going to showcase that piece for us. And then Anna Monjo, we're delighted, from ACCIÓ, is joining us. Anna's the team leader of the Catalan Cluster Programme, and she's going to respond to Alexander's presentation to showcase some of the initiatives that they have within that Catalan Cluster Programme, which has been built and developed over the last 30 years, to see if they can inspire some new policies and new initiatives in Ukraine, and see if some of what they're doing in Catalonia can really help and drive cluster development in Ukraine. So at that point, after Anna's introduction, that'll be where all of our audience and our participants will be able to come on board and get involved. So the chat function is working, because I see lots of people connecting from all over the globe and telling us who you are and where you're from. So, you know, when the presentations are ongoing, please pop in your questions and we will endeavor to answer as many of them as we possibly can. And then we'll finish out the webinar then with just a list of the different upcoming events, both for TCI and the Accelerate GDT project, just to keep you informed and up to date and with everything we're doing. So at this point, I am going to just move forward slightly, and I'm going to play a video with a welcome from Mariana Prica.
Greetings from Australia, and hello, I'm Mariana Prica. I'm really delighted to be here on behalf of the TCI network and extend a warm welcome to our first webinar, a collaboration with the Accelerate GDT project. At TCI, we like to support clusters and policymakers as they navigate the increasingly complex and changing world. From AI acceleration, the green and digital transitions, to geopolitical tensions and instability, and the increasingly growing disparity of economic inequality are all calling for stronger collaboration and adaptive strategies. Today we'll hear from Alexandre Yerchak, CEO of UCA, who will share information about the Ukrainian Cluster Ecosystem analysis that was done as part of the Accelerate GDT project. We'll get to better understand the role of clusters in Ukraine and the next steps to integrate clustering with economic policy for impact and growth. We'll then hear from Anna Monjo, ACCIÓ, who will provide insights and inspiration from 30 years of experience in the Catalan Cluster Programme. We hope you get some invaluable insights from this webinar and make some connections, and together we must continue to advocate for the role of clusters in shaping a more competitive and sustainable future. I'm sorry I won't be there to help with the questions and hear a lot more, but I'll hear some wonderful stories from the team afterwards. Enjoy, and thank you.
So, thanks very much, Mariana, for your kind words. Mariana, I guess, is probably sleeping at present because she's based in Perth in Australia. So it's the middle of the night over there, but delighted that she can join us and provide that sort of video message to kick us off today. So what I wanted to do at this point is just to, I suppose, showcase what the Accelerate GDT project is, who we are, and what we're trying to do. So in terms of what Accelerate GDT is, it's a project really about climate change and environmental degradation and the threat that poses to our planet. So we're bringing together, I suppose, through a number of different consortium members, companies from all across Europe, and we're aware that 90% of the global population of companies is SMEs. It's made up by SMEs. And they produce about 60 to 70% of the carbon emissions for the entire planet. And we feel, I suppose, as part of our project, that industry clustering and collaboration and innovation and working together can be a real answer, I suppose, to some of those particular challenges. So we've brought together 8 national and regional cluster policies from all across Europe to take steps towards meeting Europe's digital and green transition targets. Our partners are from Ireland, Spain, Italy, Austria, Hungary, Czech Republic, Germany, and we've been fortunate enough to add Ukraine to that as part of an extension application of our Accelerate GDT project. And we're delighted then to have Alexander with us from UCA to talk about their ecosystem analysis. And TCI Network work with us on the project to bring our insights and our learnings further, and they support us from a project management perspective with their expertise and their connections, I suppose, in clustering both across Europe and internationally. So in terms of the cluster ecosystem analysis that you're going to hear from Alexander just in 2 moments, all of the other partners on the project have produced and undertaken the same analysis. And we have different regions and countries with different levels of expertise in clustering and in their clustering initiatives. And today is all about, I suppose, Ukraine telling us where they are, what their cluster initiatives look like, what their program looks like, what their cluster map looks like, etc. So we can gain more of an understanding about that. And then we will be able to, I suppose, co-learn and take more steps together. So I'm going to pass over the control now to Alexander and invite you to speak about the Ukrainian cluster ecosystem analysis that you've undertaken.
Yeah, thank you, John. Hello, everybody. It's a big honor and pleasure for me to talk today and represent Ukrainian Cluster Ecosystem. I'm CEO of Ukrainian Cluster Alliance. So, of course, we know a lot about our ecosystem as we lead Ukrainian cluster movement since, let's say, more than 5 years. And I will present you a bit about more details about our ecosystem and how we are going to create cluster policy in Ukraine together with Ministry of Economy. So this is like mapping of our clusters. So altogether in Ukraine exist almost more than 70 clusters, but active of them there are about 60. So you see segmentation breakdown by regions, by industry, matureness, by size. So most of our cluster are as a small cluster. You see that just maybe about 10 clusters have more than 50 members, all other is less. And even in Ukraine, we have 26 regions, active clusters. We are realized in 16 regions. So Ukrainian Cluster Alliance, we cover roughly about 70% of active clusters. And talking about cluster policy, our stakeholders are Ministry of Economy of Ukraine, of course, they're responsible in our government of cluster policy, but also they are regional administration. We as a main cluster institution, a business union, and also, of course, clusters themselves and the international donors and other organizations. In Ukraine, we count today maybe fourth wave of cluster growth. This is dynamic by years. Typically, it's connected to change of government, but the last change we have, unfortunately, with the war in Ukraine, but let's say Ukraine Cluster Alliance was born 3 years ago, exactly these days 3 years ago, with the beginning of the war, because we work in different organization even before the war to consolidate cluster movement, but the war pushed us really to be more consolidated, more mobilized. And in fact, this growth of clusters starting from 2022, it's like our, let's say, reflection to the challenge of the war. Clusters try to be more mobilized, more consolidated, and new cluster appeared. And talking about cluster policy, of course, market is very tough, very complicated today. Well, it's of course, economy is dropped down. Even we started to a bit grow 2 years ago, so it's 2024 was very difficult, but then we have a small growth. But of course, we cannot rely on fees on our cluster members. You should know that some niche on the market exists, of course, with very fast development growth. Typically, they connected to militech, defense sector, for example. And here we have several clusters which really quickly growing. Regarding clusters located eastern and south regions, most of them were relocated to the west. So this typical characteristic of cluster like regional, some regions appearance as a level of region, it disappeared just because many clusters lost this characteristic. Today they are either national or they are relocated to the west. All other category or factor which influence cluster policy, they are, let's say, of course, state policy. We have about 5 different state policy, government policy mentioning cluster, but there is no direct cluster policy or strategy. Of course, we are supported and we really have big gratitude to the Commission. Today, there are several cluster program oriented to Ukraine. And we have special facility and recovery plan, which start to act this year. And it will also support cluster policy. Of course, there is special environment regarding low maturity, what I already said. And typically, most of our clusters, they are not supported by state. So we just at the beginning of really systematic and cluster policy. And of course, as a business association or a cluster association, we try to influence, to impact to these processes. We issued a draft national strategy 5 years ago. Today, we have about 5 position papers. So we do a lot of activity around advocacy and lobbying cluster policy at the level of government. Here is like our vision of role and place of cluster. So we have a vision that cluster could be like orchestrator of industrial ecosystem. What we call industrial ecosystem is, of course, like supply chain. We see this supply chain like resilient, digital, and green. And it should be connected, of course, with innovation ecosystem and supported by different kind of policymaker. And of course, we try to influence and create or participate different kind of instrument, which you see from the both side of this zone. Of course, today, not so many clusters are really in this role because, as I said, most of clusters are rather weak and young. But like our vision for the future, we really work to approach this future. Yeah. Regarding support from different stakeholders, especially international donors, we have a lot of different kind of programs in Ukraine, but few of them really support cluster program, especially at sustainable based. I mean, some mid-term or long-term program. Well, frankly speaking, today maybe we have no one of them. Maybe we will have during next year something from UNDP. We'll see. But anyway, we support it from different European programs. Like today, we are talking about Interreg Europe. We participate in some other program, like Interreg Danube and others. And you see here at the middle such Ukrainian policy strategy provided by different ministry, but we rely a lot of new cluster policy which will be provided this year by Ministry of Economy of Ukraine. This is our associated partner in this project, Accelerate GDT. And yes, we work on how this policy will match to cluster needs. Talking about cluster needs, of course, we have different kind of studies. This is a recent research provided by the program EU for Digital. And it's not just about Ukraine, but also about neighbors country or country so-called Eastern Partnership. It's Moldova, Georgia, Armenia, Azerbaijan. But problems are the same in every country, in all clusters. So the main gap is in funding. Yeah, because typically in all these countries, clusters are not supported by government. I mean, like supporting cluster management. So it's rather ad hoc policy. And cluster also have big problems, issue in the human resources, specific expertise. And for example, this research says that even 70% cluster management organization prioritize digitalization, but only 27% provide the services in digitalization or green support. When in EU average, it's 42%. So if I conclude about our issue in cluster policy, so we can talk that there are, of course, there are support tools, but the big fragmentation of this different kind of program, of tools, and it's ad hoc, it's not coordinated. And today there is Ministry of Economy, which we hope, we rely on our partners. They become a leader, but till now it was rather like not coordinated. And what I say is we try to find good international partner or donor to create really a mid or long-term program with clear indicator how to develop cluster in the country. And today we have two such, let's say, projects which support cluster a lot in cluster policy. First one is, thanks a lot to John, to Claudia, to TCI Network to invited us. This is project Accelerate GDT, because thanks to this project, we really tighten and really strengthens our relationship with Ministry of Economy, and this has allowed us to really to go and to start develop concept cluster policy in Ukraine. And second project, we have a very good project just started this month. It's called Cluster for Region. It's supported by UCORD and NIRAS. It's about creation cluster policy in 6 Ukrainian regions, different regions for Ukraine. What is common in this project that in both we should create some like set of instruments how to support cluster, because as I said today, it's very, very ad hoc. So we rely a lot on these two projects as they become driver. Talking about, let's say, strategic approach, how we align our goals with instrument. Of course, as I said, our goals is to create such to put cluster like orchestrator on this industrial ecosystem, which should be resilient, digital, green. We defined some 6 critical mission, to reach this goal. And typically we use UNIDO methodology that typically, sorry, it's Ukrainian, it's not translated, but it's mechanism. It's zone of impact. So there are different mechanisms how we can turn on this mechanism to reach to accomplish this mission. accreditation. And then there are, of course, some instruments corresponding to each impact zone or mechanism. And what we found that typically we have already in Ukraine many of these instruments, but the problem is that they are not adjusted, they are not aligned with cluster. So, for example, we have some program from international donors, a proposed voucher of SME in new technology, even twin transition, interization, but let's say for the moment they are not really connected to cluster policy, and cluster member, cluster coordinator, cluster manager are not motivated. They don't know how to and why to apply this voucher to their member SME, just because it's not connected to explicitly to cluster needs and to cluster policy. And so on. There are there is number of instruments we want to launch together with our Ministry of Economy. But if I simplify this a bit complicated picture, in fact, we are talking about, let's say, national level of cluster program, cluster support. So it should be based on some choice of cluster, which should go through accreditation. So we can call today like national clusters. And we expect that there will be state financial support to these clusters. Of course, it should be connected to some economical commitment, like our KPI, like number of jobs, percent of GDT, and so on, so on. So this indicator, of course, we already took from our what we call benchmark in our project in Europe, like Catalonian policy. So we know already that it works in other countries. So we are inspired of that, and we want to create something similar in Ukraine. And of course, there will be some other tools. I mentioned it, supported by financial instrument, and it can be allocated to to majority of different kind of clusters. So this is our approach, and of course, to create such policy, to launch it, we are really keen to know more about how cluster policy developed country which started earlier already work. There are a lot of questions around, is this architecture is right, or maybe it can be improved? What are priority and selectivity, especially talking about that many instruments we just start to use. Of course, we have special situation in our country with many regions affected by the war, and a cluster affected by many problems connected to the war. And so on. So we already started to put this question on the table in our discussion, our project, Accelerate GDT. And of course, we welcome any experience, any maybe benchmarks worldwide, not only in Europe, how to better build cluster policy in country like maybe. Like main point of attachment is level of maturity. Because of course our situation is special. We don't wish such situation to nobody, but we feel the support. Especially today in such turbulent weekend days we have today in the worldwide. We call to stand with Ukraine, because what our cluster help a lot to our army. And we defend not just our economy or our country, but we believe that we defend European value and the value of all democratic countries. Thank you.
That's great, Alexander. Thank you very much. So I'm going to hand over now, and Anna's going to have the controls to take us through her presentation and her response, and then we'll come back to all of the questions that we have in the chat and speak to the panel all together. Thanks. Over to you, Anna.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Alexander, for your presentation, and also for this fight you have for democracy. It's important for the whole Europe, I'm pretty sure. And congratulations for starting this policy, which are, from our point of view, it will become a success because we have the experience over 30 years. Also, John was telling that at the beginning. So what makes somehow different our policy from other policies is that it has been running for the last 30 years. Well, now 32, we say 30, but now time is running also. And even if, as you were saying, Alexander, you have different points on your cluster policy because the government changes, it also happens to us, but the reality is that we have been lucky that we have this cluster policy has been in continuity, also because it has it improves the competitiveness of our region, and of course it has the results are real. So that's why the investment that the government has in this regional policy has been long with the time, and we hope it will continue also 30 years more, but of course we will be changing. As you were saying, we have a program, the Catalan Clusters Programme. We have been working on clusters policy for the last 30 years, but our Catalan Cluster Programme has been running for the last 10 years. So it's 10 years ago when we started to develop a program with some requirements that I will share later on for the clusters to come into our program. So currently we have 27 clusters inside our Catalan Cluster Programs. Are they all the clusters we have in Catalonia? No, they are the ones that meet our requirements and also that they want to work together with us. Okay, so altogether they have more than 3,000 members, which is the 90,000 million euros global turnover altogether. And also it means it represents 36% of the industrial GDP here in Catalonia and also 36% of the industrial jobs. We have really diverse economy, so we have clusters in different activities or in different industries at this time. So just to give you a little bit of information on how our clusters are. Sorry, I'm back. Yes. So our clusters nowadays, they have on average 127 members. Okay, so some of your clusters, Alexander, maybe would be smaller than our clusters nowadays, but also ours are older, so they are 12 years on average old. Okay, our oldest cluster is 27 years old, but we have new clusters coming in that they are 2 or 3 years old. So they have different needs, but we have a program running for all of them. Okay, if we talk about their teams, we have 5 people average on each team, which it means we have like 1 person every 25 members, more or less, just to give you some numbers on how we are. To give you, all this data is taken because we evaluate our clusters every year. We have an evaluation process. Also, we work with this together with TCI. And we want to know every year what's happening just to improve our policy. And that's something that would be an advice for the future also for you in Ukraine, that you take these evaluation processes because they will give you lots of information. But if we talk about the profile of the members from our clusters, we have an economy which is full of SMEs. I assume it's the same for you. So 64% of the members from our cluster are SMEs. Then we have 13% of big companies, which is really quite a lot. Every time we have more startups because they are a good place to connect the startup with SMEs, and also tech centers and university. You were also saying that innovation and tech transfer is good inside clusters, and it's something also we have experienced, and of course we tried inside our program to boost. And then we can talk also about their income. So how our clusters are financed. So when we talk about subsidies, and here we are talking always about competitive subsidies, for being inside our program, they don't have any money for granted. So they always have to enter in competition between projects inside our program. So they have their challenges, they develop their projects, and then they ask us for funding, but we fund only the best projects. So subsidies coming from the Catalan government, the Spanish government, or at European level are 44% of the cluster's income. We also have some services they give, but also, which is important also from our side, is that to become a member of the cluster organization, you have to pay a fee. So all members from all our clusters pay a fee, and this fee is part of the clustered income. Okay, then it doesn't move now. Sorry, it's not moving. I will fix it somehow. Let me check it with this. No? Okay. Okay, yeah, I was talking before that we have some requirements that they have to meet to come into our program. Our program lasts 3 years. So every 3 years, we end our relation with our clusters, and they have to ask us again to come in, okay? And every 3 years, we think about all the requirements we ask them to be inside our program. So here is a resume of what do we ask. And on the formal part, we ask for being a non-profit entity, that their objective, and this is important, is competitiveness of their sector, of the natural cluster they represent, independence from other organizations, and alignment with our cluster policy, because at the end, we need to collaborate at a public and private level. The scope and the critical mass, we ask them a minimum of 70 members. You have seen before, they have on average 127. You were telling before that only 10 of your cluster are more than 50 members. So I think maybe they will not meet our requirements at this moment, okay? But you will have to think at one moment on time, which is the average number, which is the minimum number you ask them, and also an aggregate turnover, first of the members, and also from the aggregate value chain they represent. They need to be, they have a scope minimum in Catalonia. We work more at regional level and not at country level as you do, but also not to be duplicated with other clusters, and have a whole representation of their value chain. Then what we evaluate the most, and what is most important for us, is the strategy and the governance of the cluster. So they need to have their strategic analysis and an identification of the challenges that they want to work within the cluster. An annual action plan that we also evaluate, and inside their board, they need to have a minimum of 70% of private companies. Also, we ask them to have an agent inside the board. And when we talk about an agent, we talk about a tech transfer center or maybe university, okay? Because we want them also to be part of the board of directors. We evaluate the governance and also the trajectory they had the last years. You were saying before that they have to work on internationalization, innovation. We check what they have been doing for the last years to see if they meet all the requirements. And a level of resource and accreditations, we ask for 3 people hired and minimum the ISCA bronze label. That's what we ask. What do we give them? So we give lots of services. First, a strategic support. They all have we are 11 people here working in clusters at the regional level here in Catalonia. So we give them a specific consultant, help, evaluation, advice on European programs and on scalable, support on cluster integration, whatever they may need, they always know they can call us and we will work together with their strategy. Also, and which is more important, and you have also talked about this a little bit, Alexander, is about capacity building. We have a capacity building program run by 3 people from our team, and we have training for cluster management team. We have support on selection and professional career of the team members, training, and we ask them also through evaluation every year, what do you need? And then we re-evaluate our capacity building support, meeting their requirements. Also, we help them with their connection. We work inside the government, so we help them connecting with other parts from the government, and also networking activities, and also some reference events like the Cluster Day we celebrate every year. And at the end, also, if they have good projects, we give them access to specific subsidy line. But that's not the most important thing we give. The most important thing are services that at the end, you don't need so much financial support, but you need to have a good team. If we talk about this funding we give them, there are 2 big lines. One is for developing their annual action plans, and another is for developing projects. You can have more information about this if you want. If we talk about their action plans, what do we ask them is, first of all, they have to work in knowledge transfer and networking. That's the basis for any clusters. If the networking is good between the members, then projects come. And that's what, if the environment is the good environment inside the cluster organization, projects come, and they have internationalization projects, innovation projects, growth projects, projects with the startups, wherever. And then they can present these projects to our subsidy line also. We also help them, and we want them to work interclusters, so different sectors working together because some of the challenges they have, they are shared. And also, which is more important about all the things they do, is that our shared value initiatives. So all the activities they develop, they need to have a positive impact at environment level and also at the social level. And that's something that John was mentioning also at the beginning as the objective from these GDT projects. But what we want at the end is a strategic change. So they have a strategic challenges. They have to develop all these activities to have an impact on their sector. If we talk about projects, then we have, well, I was not talking before, but what we help them is them with personal expenses and also some external expenses. In the case of the projects, it's the cluster who coordinates the project, and there are up to 8 participants in every project who can be companies, universities, tech centers, clusters. It depends on the project itself. We also give them money for the personal expenses and external expenses, and we open every year once every year. Usually we have around 2 million euros for this funding, and they present all the projects and they are in competition. I wanted just to end to share with you a couple of examples. So one is about our living spaces cluster, so our habitat cluster. And they presented this year this project where they have been developing the 3-year 3D printing, and sustainable materials for developing some lab experimental concepts around restoration and hotel rooms. So they create these hotel rooms with materials that are sustainable, they are more recyclable, and also they can be more customized as they create them with this 3D printing technology. And another project, and I've seen that something from this cluster is attending this session today, and I didn't know, so it's good. And they have developed this smart farm bracelet, which the main objectives of this project is to develop a technical tool that allows the monitoring in the field work for the people who works in agricultural, in this case for cherries, and they improve the workers' health and safety while they are working in these conditions. And well, you can contact with any of our clusters if you want a little bit of information, and also if you want to know a little bit about our policy, I would be glad to hear from you.
That's great, Anna. Thank you very much. So I think now we have some time for questions, and it's been fantastic, I suppose, to cram such information on both the ecosystem analysis in Ukraine and also the Catalan Cluster Programme. I know it's very, very difficult to push everything into to such a short period of time. So well done to you both for making that available to us, and we're delighted now, I suppose, to take questions from the audience. We have one from Bob Briot, who was asking, and I don't know if we can, if Bob is with us, if we can open his video and allow him to ask his question himself to Alexander. I don't know if that's possible, Claudia, and if not, I can read it from the chat.
He can talk if Bob wants to talk, of course.
Perfect. Bob, can you hear us?
Yeah, I'm on video audio. There you go. You got me.
Oh, that's brilliant. Great to hear you, Bob, and hope all is good in Arizona. Maybe you can pitch your question to Alexander about the optics clusters.
Alexander, I've been in the Ukraine. I've done economic development in optics clusters in Chernivtsi, and an oligarch said, hey, you guys, you don't do international stuff. I brought him to a breakfast with people from the Ukraine, Chernivtsi, and they were working the system, and that entity started a company, and they stole some contracts away from me because they used a distributor I gave them, and they got a contract from the British, and British called me and said, hey, bro, you got good news, bad news. You're losing some money, but your company you started in the Ukraine, Chernivtsi, is getting some contracts. So it is done. So my question is, how much do your clusters get revenue on a global scale? What percentage of them? And the optic cluster in Arizona does tons of money. We're talking about in the billions of dollars from out of Arizona.
Yeah, so we don't have exactly statistical information. We can just judge about size of the cluster. For example, you have one of the biggest cluster, two biggest cluster in Ukraine are IT clusters. They specialized in IT industry. It's Lviv and Kharkiv. And for example, Lviv cluster, they have about 300 members, and they're rich, but I don't know their turnover, but I don't know. I know that they have 60% in their, let's say, staff, cluster management team. Or for example, Kharkiv IT cluster, they have 16 people in cluster management team. So, but I don't know exactly the figure. If we are talking about, overall pictures through Ukraine, let's say percentage in GDP of our cluster is today it's quite low. But I mean, of course, cluster organization, because I don't, I'm not talking about, cluster like original economic chain or value chain, because in this case of the statistic can be different. Of course, we have like cluster, but not organize it into cluster organization in strong in machinery, in metalworking. So it's a bit different, but they are not organized it into cluster organization. Yeah.
John, can you bring me back up again?
Yeah. Speak away, Bob. Perfect.
But the live video, because behind me I have a flag that the president of the University of Shenevsky gave me. It's a Ukrainian flag. And by the way, you guys, my grandmother came from Ternopil. So I got blood in your game with a smile on my face.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, Bob. Thanks a lot.
Bob.
We were supported a lot by American people, and we have today, especially one of the, let's say, association which with the beginning of the war invested a lot into us. It's Control System as Integrator Association, and they helped us a lot at the beginning of the war. They just, financially, and till today we support my relationship with American friends. So I think we'll have better time also in politician, but I hope for that.
We have another question for you here, Alexander, about what would be the corresponding cluster in Ukraine to discuss a high voltage equipment supply for Ukrainian energy infrastructure? Is there one of your clusters that's working on energy that you could maybe connect?
We have but there was a small cluster called digital energy, and they include several big operator like DTEC Energy Network. So is the biggest distribution energy operator in Ukraine, and they include several regional operator. So it's good if you are looking some, let's say, contact point in this domain. We can provide you with contact of this cluster.
Maybe you could just post the website or some connection details or the name in there into the chat, and we can take it from there. I guess there's a few other questions that have already been answered in the chat, and I see one from Sean Finley from Geosciences in Ireland, and I guess I suppose one of the things from an Irish perspective and us looking at this webinar as well is really, I suppose, what I'd like to do is ask Anna if she was to magically move to the Ukraine and take over cluster development there, what would be your first steps based on, I suppose, what you've heard from Alexander and other countries that are looking to start cluster policies? If you were looking to start there and you were given that magic job of doing that in Ukraine, what would be your first steps, I guess,
My first step would be maybe to check which are the natural clusters, because I was talking a lot about cluster organizations, but cluster organizations come later. You first of all, you need to understand what do you have. And I think, Alexander, they already have some work on that. They had a nice map on putting their clusters there. But then I would analyze for those that are bigger, maybe their value chains, and then I will start some quantification on how many companies do we have in this region, and then from there, seeing which are the ones that have more potential, and on those that have this strategical challenges that are more aligned also with the challenges we have from the government, because some of them, they are not so aligned. So I would start checking what do we have, and then once we have selected these maybe magical ones that we think that would provide, that are more aligned also with the policies we have from the government, we would start creating the cluster organizations.
Very good.
That's
great
a
to
long
hear.
time.
I suppose it's all a process and building and developing the policy. And as part of the Accelerate GDT project, we're working collaboratively as a partnership, I guess, with many of your colleagues across ACCIÓ who are part of the project, but connecting with Alexander and other partner regions to see what are the steps. And I guess, looking at the big sectors, looking at policy as it is at present and the situation that the countries and regions are currently in, you have to take your first steps from there. But we can take many learnings, I guess, from the different partner regions. If there are any other questions, please feel free to pop them in the chat. And maybe at this point, Alexander, is there anything from Anna's presentation that stood out to you, or that you'd like more details on, or any particular element?
Yeah, it's very interesting. We will already because in the project we already invited colleagues from ACCIÓ, from Catalonia to present the experience. But what I saw today, it's many new elements. So thank you, Anna. Maybe just a question for you. So because you are really mature policy and it's stable and successful. So what challenges do you consider, which I don't know, in the future, next 3 years? And second question, what is really practical for us? Up to you. What skills cluster manager should own, should master, to be successful and develop their cluster?
Well, we have many challenges for the future. I think that as everyone, we have, first of all, to maintain our policy. One challenge that we have in front of us is to develop the shared value initiatives or strategies. So it's something that we didn't do so much back in the past, and we are pretty sure that only companies with positive impact at social or environmental level will continue in the future, at least here. And we are really helping our clusters to develop these strategies that have this positive impact. Also, another challenge that we have is how to make companies bigger. So what we have been seeing is that our companies inside clusters, some are big companies, but in general in the Catalan economy, companies are really small. So if you want to be competitive, not only regional level, but at the international level, you have to be bigger. So how do we help them through clusters also to become bigger companies and to be more competitive in the future? Regarding cluster managers, it's true that we are pretty sure that the cluster manager figure is key for developing the cluster organization. So it's important that you take a lot of time to find the perfect person. But what we see is that the most important thing is their soft skills, so that they need to be able to develop projects, to have human connections, because create confidence also with the people who's around, because if you are the cluster manager, you need to talk with everyone in the cluster and matchmaking all these projects. You need to have an international vision, but at the end, the sectorial expertise is not so important. In the future, at least if it's not a really technological cluster, when you are talking about maybe cybersecurity cluster, you need someone who knows about cybersecurity. But if you are talking of some other kind of clusters, maybe it's better someone with really good soft skills, and they will learn a lot about the sector, no? But that's something we have seen with the time, and it works with us.
Okay, thanks.
That's great. Thanks a million. Are there any other questions from our audience? Because if not, we might just move on, because there's a couple of other things I just want to share with you. So in terms of the, just see if I can move on the slides again. So just to mention and reiterate as well, I guess that that we have this overall sort of project, or the overall Accelerate GDT project, where we're doing this ecosystem analysis that Alexander has presented today. And we did a webinar similar to this exactly nearly 1 year ago, where we presented each of the different ecosystem analysis from the other partner regions. And one, I suppose what I wanted to do, just to bring them all together, and they're all available through the Accelerate GDT website in the library section there. But one of the things I just wanted to share was that I suppose 4 out of our 8 partner regions have a dedicated national or regional cluster policy. 3 of those have centralized supports, or a team, like Anna spoke about her team in ACCIÓ, where you have a group of people who are working with the clusters on a day-to-day basis to help them with their challenges, to develop their capacity building, and all of those supports that Anna mentioned to us during her presentation. And that seems to be a really strong element of those particularly strong programs all across Europe. So it's something, investing in the team and in knowledge within the government, I think, or within the public entities, is hugely important for the success and the longevity of a cluster program. And then when we talk about things like financial supports, even if regions have or don't have a particularly focused cluster strategy, a number of them do have cluster manager support and do have particular financing for cluster managers themselves, for the operations of cluster organizations, for travel of cluster managers and those cluster organizations to participate in events across their own country and across Europe or further afield. And a number of them, maybe 5 out of the 8, have particular cluster funding for collaborative projects, where a number of different SMEs or cluster members can work together to innovate and collaborate and work on particular elements, like Anna gave examples of in her last slide. So we just wanted to sort of showcase these particular supports, etc. I'm just going to have one more look at the chat, because I think there's one more. So Sean, I think, has just popped a message in there. Sean Finley from Geosciences in Ireland. Do you want to, we can see if Claudia can open your microphone and you can ask your question there, if that's okay.
You can talk now, yes.
Perfect.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you, John. Can you hear me all right?
We can hear you perfect, yes.
Thank you very much. I see there's actually a reply in from Alexandra. My query was whether there are any clusters in Ukraine that deal with critical raw materials and minerals. And the reply is that typically that market's dominated by big companies and they need licenses and permissions. Yeah. I was thinking more of the supply chain for searching and developing minerals, thinking of the type of companies that we have, which would be geological consultants, engineers, drilling companies, contractors. Obviously, minerals are central to geopolitics. They always have been, but very much more so in recent times, and in particular in relation to Ukraine. But thanks for the answer, and thanks, John, for organizing this.
Perfect. Thanks a million, John. I'm glad that we could answer it, and I'm sure we can make connections in the background as well to the various different clusters that are involved. And I'm happy to share your details and Geosciences Ireland with Alexandra after the webinar as well. So just to
thank you very much.
Yeah, just to finalize things here, I suppose on these slides, and thank you all very much for your questions and your answers and your responses to those as well. But just to give you 2 last slides and to pull things to a close for our webinar today, just the next steps on the Accelerate GDT project. We've been invited to the West Data Festival in Laval in France, and there'll be a number of our partners from ACCIÓ and the National Development Center in Hungary who'll be presenting there. and connecting with another Interreg Europe project, CEI Boost. We've also been invited to speak about our experiences around clusters and skills at the Europe Let's Cooperate Interreg Europe event, where we'll have partners from the UCA in Ukraine and ACCIÓ participating in different breakout sessions there. And our next face-to-face gathering will take place in Prague in the Czech Republic, hosted by Czech Invest, where we'll be looking at clusters and smart specialization strategies. From a TCI perspective then, sorry, something comes up in the chat, it stops me moving on the slide, so that's why it takes a little bit of time. But from a TCI perspective then, we're delighted, I suppose, to announce the next events that we have. So there'll be another webinar on cluster policies on the 8th of April. There'll be other events in June, and the global conference in October, which will be hosted here in Ireland, and we're delighted to participate in part of that. And we hope that you'll be open to traveling here and participating as part of that conference as well. But before that, there's also the General Assembly towards the end of March, and there's a cluster policy workshop, which is again a nice collaboration with another Accelerate GDT partner, the National Development Center, who'll be hosting that in Budapest in Hungary in June. So for anyone who's very, very interested in cluster policies and learning in that space, we'd be delighted to see you again in Budapest in June. So my final slide is just to thank you all for your attendance today, and to give a special mention and thanks to Claudia, who's been pulling everything together in the background and ensuring that everything runs smoothly. So all the mistakes made were just by me, but everything else was running efficiently in the background. So thanks a million, Claudia, for your professionalism and running everything and ensuring that we can talk and connect with all of the different people who were able to join us for the questions today. And final thanks goes to Mariana, Anna, and Alexander for their interventions and their welcomes today. It takes a lot of work to put all the material together, and it's even tougher to condense it down into 10 or 15 minutes. But I think it's fantastic to know about your regions and your policies, and we look forward to hearing the next steps, both as part of the project, as part of TCI, and as personal colleagues as well. So thank you all very, very much for your participation, and enjoy the rest of your day. And we will post all of the material, the recordings, the slides, and the connections we have on both the TCI and the Accelerate GDT websites in due course. So wishing everyone a great afternoon, and speak to you all again soon. Take care.
Yeah. Thanks, John.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, bye.
Bye now.